Hi friends, I wanted to pop on today and talk about a few mods that I've made to my sardine pattern and with some tips of what you can try and if you wanted to do some of these too. So I thought I would just show them real quick and then we'll go to an overhead view so I can kind of do a little bit more detail information about each. This is needle turned applique. We have a Sawtooth star sardine. This is fully quilted, might be hard to see, with batting. This is hand quilted with thin batting. This is also thin batting, but the head part is not quilted or have batting behind it. And then of course in the pattern there is the two patchwork versions, which you can make following the diagrams or photos, I guess, in the pattern. This one was not quilted or have batting, but the other one was. So we're going to go to the overhead view and talk a little bit about each individual one. And I have underneath, it's not done yet, one with like the scallops too. So we'll talk about that. Let's start with what is in the pattern and just give you a few little nuances about it. We have the patchwork fish, and what I showed in the pattern is only patchworking the body section, not the head. So to get this body section, you should know from the pattern that you have to tape the top body and the belly pieces together to cut out this piece. And I share a page in the pattern about how to lay out this patchwork if you want to do on point. Now, a couple of my testers did like horizontal / vertical rows of square patchwork, and that was lovely too. On this one, I do have very thin batting behind it, and then I hand stitched some little wavy lines, just following the scoop of the squares. This one has no batting nor stitching on it, so those are both options. When I put batting behind the patchwork, I do not put batting behind the head, and I do use very thin batting because I don't want to change the shape of the sardine at all. Batting can make the seams be a little bit thicker. It can change the shape just a little bit. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but you don't have to put batting on the head piece if you put batting behind the patchwork. So, and then on the back of these, both they're just single fabrics. You can see this one does not have the top fin and this one does. So you can do either option. You just can't do the flipper because the flipper only goes in the ones that are seamed unless you make patchwork for those separate sections, which would be cute too. So let's move those aside and move on to the hand quilted. So this is just a single fabric on the body section, again, where you tape the top body to the belly piece and cut out this section. The head is cut out separately, of course, because it's a separate fabric. This does also have very thin batting behind, and by thin batting, I use Warm and Natural typically, and I would just go with their thinnest cotton batting that you can find. I would not use any of the fluffy type battings. You could also use flannel behind it. It definitely is nice to have something behind it when you quilt it, just to give something extra for those stitches to catch on. And then I just drew a scallop. These are freehand. I started up here and I worked my way down, and I drew the scallop on and just stitched right on top of it. I did have the piece already cut out of the fabric for this one, and I was just very careful not to pull any of my stitching tight. You could do that. I'll show you what I did for the needle turn applique, and you could also do that option. So if you are pre-cutting the piece before you're quilting, just make sure your quilting is not going to shrink the fabric down too much, because then it won't align with the back. This one again has the top fin and is a single fabric back. This is a fully quilted panel Sardine. So it's one single fabric on the back and the front, and it's two-sided because I added the eye to the back. Really, there's no reason not to make a single fabric sardine two-sided because it's already just one fabric on each side. You just have to add the eye to the back. So what I did for this, and I'll show you some clips of it, is I quilted a width of fabric by 18-inch piece of fabric. I was able to load it onto my long arm, and you'll see that in this clip. And how I quilted it is I went top to bottom with my long arm. If you're doing this on a sewing machine, you could do the same thing, quilting a panel roughly 37 inches wide by 18 inches will give you 2 pieces for the back and front fully quilted. The only thing with this is that it is tricky if you are doing a directional scallop for the quilting. Because I just quilted a big panel, I was very thankful that this fabric was not directional so that I could just flip my pattern as I show in this clip, and then I was able to keep that scallop the same direction. If my fabric was directional and I had to flip my pattern in the manner that the pattern calls for, where it's in a horizontal reversed location, then this scallop wouldn't have worked because on one side it would have been backwards. So that's just something to keep in mind. Either keep a non-directional print or do a non-directional quilt. But I love the scallops because it gives the look of scales, so that's why I did that. So just something to keep in mind as you're selecting fabric for that. So let's move on to the needle turned applique. Now this is one of my first attempts at needle turn applique, and I can definitely see a lot of my stitches. I don't have a pattern for this. I did one-sided where it's just a single fabric sardine, but as you can see, because there's no needle turn applique on the back, I didn't really feel like it needed an eye on the back. I really love the look of this. I was emulating an artist, Becca Worley, that I really love, but needle turn applique is really tricky. So I'll show you in some clips here. What I did is I drew a chalk outline of the pattern piece, and then I hand cut, just without pattern, all of these shapes. These are actually bias strips. The stems are actually bias strips, and then I stitched it all on. And then after I stitched it on, along the edge of the sardine where it's drawn on the panel, I stay stitched any of the needle turn applique that goes over the edge, which is mainly the stems, but that was just so that in case my hand stitches didn't go all the way through once it was cut out, that would help it. And then I cut out the actual sardine from around the chalk outline and cut out the back piece as well. And I realize this is backwards from the eye. It's hard to tell because without distinct features like the head shape or the belt, the extra piece, it's hard to sometimes tell which is which. So I would definitely recommend needle turn applique, but it is tricky if you're not used to it. And but it's a really fun look for the sardine, in my opinion. Okay, moving on. So this is the Sawtooth starfish. I made a panel with 3 sawtooth stars and then this additional piece for the tail. And I actually have a free downloadable one page printable of the dimensions for this panel. It ends up being like 31 by I think 8 or 8.5, and it gives you all the dimensions for every piece and gives you very simple written instructions for what to sew. And basically you're just doing the stitch and flip method for these points on either a rectangle or a square. And then once I had the panel done, I laid my pattern on top of the panel and cut out this body section. And then I did stay stitch around the edges again just to hold any of those seams in place so they wouldn't unravel since I had cut through them and they were no longer back stitched in some places. And then I sewed it up like a regular sardine. I did not put batting behind this, but if you use woven, I would consider batting because to me this guy is much lumpier. This sardine is wovens as well. These are both Fabulism wovens, and this one has the batting because it's quilted. Oh, and just another little thing about this is that when I quilted on the long arm, I did not have a backing. It was just batting and then the woven on top of it. I'm sorry I didn't say that before. But you can see kind of how smooth this is and how wobbly this feels. And that only happened with the woven fabric. All of the quilting cotton held its shape. But if you use wovens, I would probably recommend, even if you're not piecing or quilting anything, doing a thin layer of interfacing just to give it some stability. This is a fun one. You could, as long as your panel that you're cutting from is roughly 31 by 8, you could patchwork anything. The way I designed this one is just so it's kind of centered on the body, the stars, and then you have the tail going off from there. So that's a fun one. Go to my website, woollypetals.com, if you want to download that. It's within the sardine blog post, and I will talk about that, or I'll link that in the comments below, or in the description, I think. Okay, our last one, which is not done. This is a struggle for me. I really wanted to do some sort of scallop. So you can see I've played with a few things, a little clamshell, which I pillowcased, and then just like this sort of a shape, which I cut like by just kind of extending this up. So the problem that I ran into is that I wanted to have these so they're flappy, but doing it this way with this shape, you can see after I flap them up that you see this raw edge. So I think I could combat that by doing a zigzag stitch in the same color thread. And I mean, I do love that look. So then I started to play with these. I think I don't have the shape quite right, but maybe after they like, if it was just these and not those. But then again, I get into the same issue because you'd have to sew along the straight edge, which again, I could do with a matching thread with a zigzag. And then this would go over this. And so you would see some of it. So that's really, I kind of have come to determine this is probably the way I have to do it, where you're going to see some of that raw edge, but just trying to get it to blend in more, unless I sliced and diced. Like if I cut this fabric here and inserted these into a seam, but then I don't know if I'm up for that. So I'd be curious if anybody else has any information on how to do this so that they're flappy and you hide stuff. So yeah, I am not really sure how to do it. So that has been bending my brain lately, and I would love to have shared a way to do it. But my only other thought is that if I didn't make them flappy and like EPP clamshells, I just would stitch along, either topically or hand stitch them. So that's an option. Doing this where they are in rows and just doing a nice finished edge with like a zigzag stitch in the color of the scallops. And then it would be covered, or making a panel with actual literal seams with these in it. So I don't know. If you have any thoughts on this, I would love to hear it. If you have made a sardine and done anything different or unique, I would love to see it. Please tag me on social media. Comment here. Let me know what you've done. They're addicting and so much fun. The only other thing I want to touch on is you can see that some of my sardines go the opposite direction. That's very easy to achieve if you do a double-sided sardine. If you're not doing a double-sided sardine, you just take whatever the front of your sardine is and make sure that it's facing the direction you want it to face, and then have the back pattern piece face the opposite direction. And that will achieve whatever direction sardine you would like to make. Thank you guys so much for making the sardine pillow pattern such a success. It has been so much fun to work on, and I'm so excited that all of you are so excited to make one. I just really didn't think that everybody loves sardines as much as I did, but it brings me great joy to see them all. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you make a sardine.